Welcome to the Orton Gillingham Podcast, a Brainspring production. Today, we'll speak with Denise Sherman, Curriculum and Instructional Specialist at Brainspring, about the importance of handwriting instruction for students, how handwriting helps develop important skills later in life, and what we risk losing if we cut back on handwriting instruction in schools. Keep listening.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Orton Gillingham Podcast. I'm Esther, and I'm here with Denise Sherman. Kara is not joining us today. She's not in town, so we're going to miss Kara today. But welcome, Denise. Denise Sherman, nice to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So Denise is a curriculum and instructional specialist here at Brainspring, and she has been working really hard on a new course, which is called Handwriting Lessons for Print. And she has created it and written a handwriting course, which will be available soon. So handwriting is something, Denise, that I feel like has become a casualty to technology and in instruction everywhere. I mean, I feel like people are not teaching handwriting anymore, or not formally anyway. I remember learning handwriting when I was in elementary school, and it was something that we did every day. We practiced with the circles and the lines and and I don't see teachers necessarily doing that as much. At least it's not required. And so we know that because of that, there's probably some repercussions to that, to kids not learning handwriting or focusing mostly on keyboarding, which is something that comes up all the time. But, well, if they know how to keyboard, then why do they need to learn handwriting? Or why do they need to learn cursive? You know, these are things that come up all the time. So I just want to kind of talk to you a little bit about what you think the importance of handwriting is. And if we stop teaching it, what is going to be lost?
Yes, so a lot of teachers today tend to have a workbook and they set it in front of their students if they are teaching handwriting. And just that rote writing of a letter without building those connections, you're losing the connection between all of the motor and the cognitive elements. And so handwriting really builds neural pathways. And when we teach handwriting in early elementary and to little young students and give them a writing utensil as soon as possible, we're building those neural connections when they're in their prime and their brains are developing.
Mm-hmm. That's that. Yeah. That, I mean, it's much more than just creating a letter, right?
Right.
Yeah. So talk about the skills that, because of handwriting, the critical thinking skills that they can learn early or help develop because of handwriting. What are some of the things that handwriting benefits?
So handwriting benefits not only letter recognition, but when paired with a little bit of a phonics element, they're also building that sound symbol connection. As students learn to form those letters correctly and with automaticity, they spend less of their cognitive load or working memory on recalling those letters.
Mm-hmm.
So then they can apply that to spelling concepts and to eventually written composition.
Right. What they're saying and not how to spell the word or write the letters that
Right.
create the words. The other thing is a lot of kids have very messy handwriting. So how is that an indication of anything if kids have a hard time actually forming the letters or illegibly writing the letters? Does that indicate anything?
They may have underdeveloped gross motor or visual motor skills. And so one of the things that we're including in handwriting lessons for print are pre-writing skills and also meaningful teacher-directed centers where they can focus on building these underlying skills.
Okay.
Because that gross motor is important, also the visual motor and the fine motor. And also even just if they're pushing up versus pulling down on a letter, there's a lot of different motor controls that those are encompassing. And so that pulling down is really how we want them to form most of those letters.
Yeah, I think there's there's stuff that's going on inside the brain that handwriting is helping, and then the product of the handwriting, some kids just have beautiful handwriting and they're very comfortable with the formation of the letters. And it probably is those kids who are able then to create more, like you said, spend that cognitive load on what they're saying rather than how they're saying it. But some kids just have the most beautiful handwriting. And I think back to, if we talk about keyboarding and technology, just I keep going back to that. And if all we ever do is write emails, type emails back and forth to each other, what is going to be lost? I think about, people are saying handwriting's not that important. It's not important for kids to know, because we have access to all this technology. But I feel like, when I look at the Civil War documentaries that Ken Burns did, and he shows the letters, people writing the letters that were written, and they're so beautifully crafted. And even the language that is used in those is so different than what we would see now. I mean, how many kids write letters even anymore? If we could go back to that would be amazing, because it's a piece of history, right? It's a connection to another person, but it's probably even more scientifically even more than that. Yeah.
Well, Stephen Graham does a lot of meta-analysis with his researchers, and they have done a lot of work in studying the effects of writing on critical thinking and comprehension, and writing by hand across content levels builds comprehension and builds knowledge. And so the more that students are writing, the more that they are able to comprehend and synthesize. And I tell my daughter all the time, she's in college, I'm like, if you need to, go back and write your notes by hand, because there are fMRI studies and EEG studies that show that you are more likely to remember when you write by hand.
Yes. I used to do that too, just to help me remember. Yeah, and it really does work. So what is going on with handwriting in schools now? Do you also feel that the emphasis has kind of been taken away a little bit from handwriting, or what do you think's going on in schools?
I do. I think it's been pulled away. And a lot of times, like I said, they tend to give them the workbook. And that's their independent work practice. Or let's trace the letter first and then write it without the teacher modeling. The teacher needs to model. They need to guide them. They need to teach them the verbal motor paths that support that formation. And they need to actively write.
Right. So what would you, if a teacher's listening here, can you give an example of how you might, some of the things that you would recommend doing that don't typically get covered, like even just the left and right kind of thing?
Yes, reinforcing directionality is very important for these students, especially teaching letters by formation group. So you've got your C-stroke letters with your C, your D, and that will help identify and help those students to make fewer reversals. Also, modeling correct letter formation, bringing in a lot of practice, and also authentic level practice. So whenever you can practice writing individual letters, then practice them in words, maybe through your encoding or your dictation practices that you're doing. And then eventually that can lead into your sentences.
Yeah. So, very organically leading into that. In early days, they would write on slates, right? They would write on chalkboards. And how is that different? Nobody writes on chalkboards anymore. Is that causing any kind of change in handwriting or in the brain?
I am not aware if there's actual research on this.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw that out there.
Okay.
Because, back then, too, they didn't do a lot of the research.
Right.
But I know that there is research in writing with a pencil and that tactile feedback that you get when you drag your pencil across that paper. And if you think about the resistance that you get with the chalk on the slate, there is more of a kinesthetic tactile feedback that you're getting. And I think that promotes that writing. It's that multisensory loop that we know that the more multisensory something is, the more likely we are to remember it.
Right.
Because we're building those neural pathways.
Right. So very different experience than writing with a marker on a whiteboard.
And even on an iPad with a stylus. You don't get that feedback. It's so smooth and sleek that you're just almost making that motion.
Okay. Yeah. I know there are programs, Orton Gillingham-based programs, that recommend getting a chalkboard in your class. I mean, get a chalkboard in there. So as we move into, I keep coming back to this digital world, students are losing, they're losing fine motor skills. Is there anything else, do you think, besides that students are going to be losing it as we move into a more digital, or what should teachers be more conscious of as we move into this very digital world to try to amp up those skills? I mean, what should they be conscious of?
Bring in some play-based activities. Have them building, have them sorting, picking up items. The more that they are using their hands, the more that they're developing dexterity and fine motor.
Okay.
Also, they need their gross motor to have fine motor. So these kids who, everybody's background is different, they're all going to develop, maybe not at the same time. So even building those gross motor, I saw a great video recently on how they're building gross motor activities into PE in early elementary so that they can build those trunk muscles. Posture, paper position, these are all important factors that go into handwriting and legibility and automaticity.
So when you talk about gross motor skills, you're talking about, give us some more examples. So you mentioned posture.
In order to be strong in your gross motor, you need a solid foundation like your trunk muscles, even shoulder stability and neck. You need to slant your paper at a 20 to 45 degree angle down on the same side as your writing hand. And then that will support your shoulder movement as you write as well.
Yeah, so it's not all just what's going on
In the hand.
but in the whole body. Are there things that parents can do at home to help, maybe some games, specific games or activities that parents can do to help their kids with their handwriting?
Well, like the gross motor ones would be
Yes.
hokey pokey, all of the hand, shoulders, knees, and toes, good old fashioned singing and dancing and doing fun activities, crawling, acting silly and having fun with them and making them into games. But also, when you go to a restaurant, don't necessarily give them your phone at first. Let them do the good old-fashioned coloring mats that we did as kids.
Right.
Play tic-tac-toe. Do some activities with writing. Have them make lists when you need to go to the grocery store. Have your child make that list for you. It doesn't have to be spelled correctly if they're not there yet. Just have them write.
Start writing. Yes, exactly. I know that when I was teaching, and I taught high school, and I had this activity where I said, we're going to write letters to people. So they all chose, I think it was a grandparent or an older person, and I said, we're gonna write some letters. And I was shocked at the inability to actually put a pencil to a paper and create a letter. And even just not even knowing how to address an envelope or where to put the address. All of those skills, those physical handwriting skills are just, it's shocking that they're not, kids today are just, they've been replaced. And so I think that activity was very well received. At first they were like, what? But then they would get a letter back. And just even, talk about this connection between receiving something in writing, actual physical, a letter. How is that different than receiving an email? I think about that, the difference between, I get an email in my inbox and I read it, but how is that different than getting a letter in the mail and, actually physically having to open it up? What benefits are kids getting from that, do you think?
It's incredibly personal.
Yes.
It's a connection.
Yes.
It can build that empathy too, because they get sad if they don't get one back too. So it's that how it makes them feel.
Right.
But it's so relatable because we say emails are supposed to be quick. Don't be too emotional in an email necessarily, like make it quick, make it professional.
Right.
Whereas a letter is deeply personal.
Yes.
And you can tell a lot about somebody by their writing. And that's something too that has been being studied right now too, is how people's handwriting tells you about their intelligence or their educational background or where they're at. And so people study that as well right now.
Even how they're feeling, or if they're feeling rushed and or they're really trying to send a very heartfelt thing. People would take more care to write a neat letter.
I do think that the cursive that we used to write when we were writing, like you said, in the Civil War letters and things like that, and when we wrote on slates, like I remember when I learned to write in cursive, we were taught how to
Yeah.
write in cursive, and it had to be pretty, and we
Yeah.
had to focus on it. So,
Yeah.
not that I'm saying that that's necessarily
Right.
all experiences, but
Right.
I do think that back in the day in those one-room schoolhouses, it was definitely a different educational experience, right? We all know that. But I think that they were able to express themselves in a different way.
I think it's slowing down. It's just slowing down a little bit. And and being intentional about the way something looks, how it looks on a line. That slows you down enough to help you really think about really meaningful things to say. So we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about physically, the creation of letters and how important handwriting is, but also the benefit of once you do know how to write, your letters correctly, what's the result of that, And I mean, I think, and I always say it too, I'm like, a letter is like when you put your hand on a pen or pencil and you write on a piece of paper, it's like your actual DNA is on there, and you're actually sending that to somebody, and it's such a personal thing, Yeah.
You can't just hit backspace on a letter.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't like that sentence. You
Right.
have to sit and think with your thoughts.
Right.
And consider and synthesize that information.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're more automatic with your letter formation, you're able to get your thoughts down.
Right. And I think that's the key, is that we want to teach kids handwriting so that it becomes automatic. So that you're not just thinking about, oh my gosh, I want to write this word, but I don't know how to make that letter. And so all of a sudden your attention is taken away from what you wanted to say and is turned over to how do I do it? And that's the same thing with, reading as well, right?
Yes.
So it all ties together, the reading and writing, and we talk about structured literacy, and we look at that Scarborough's rope, and we look at all of the things that are important for word recognition. It's all still also for writing, right?
Right.
So
There's that automaticity strand for writing.
For writing.
Handwriting is right there. Handwriting.
Exactly. So science of reading isn't just reading, it's writing, and that whole automaticity section, you have phonological awareness on the reading side, and you have handwriting on the other side, right? I mean, it's like, it's got to be automatic. And I think that gets lost. I think that, we want kids we're expecting them to do so much, but we're not teaching them the tools to be able to do it automatically.
Right. Or we're thinking, oh, if you just form the letter correctly, we're good.
We're good.
But it's
Yeah.
that instant recall, and can you form it correctly and automatically?
Yes.
And legibly.
Yes.
And that's what we're working towards.
Yes. And it's not just letters either, is it?
No, because
Numbers
as you go
too.
through, numbers, it all goes back to that. You're building that formation and those neural connections.
Exactly. So I would say to parents, have your kids write some letters to some family members, or
Get a pen pal.
get a pen pal, a good old-fashioned pen pal. That's right. So is there anything else, any other kind of final thoughts or advice that you'd like to give to parents, teachers, school administrators, kids? Any final thoughts? Handwriting is your passion. At least it's one of them. And I can tell you, I've seen Denise's book, and it's very exciting. It's going to be really great and really easy for teachers to implement and do in the classroom. And so we do want to look out for that coming soon. And then we're also going to be having a course, right, that goes along with your book, a self-paced course that teachers can look out for as well. But any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Yes, handwriting is very important. It builds that science of reading. It builds those neural connections. It just helps with overall child development. And once we focus on that handwriting and getting it automatic, we're going to see growths in our students. Huge growth.
And not just in handwriting.
No, not just in handwriting and reading too, because as they build that sound symbol connection, they're going to just keep going. So it'll carry over into their reading and their spelling, and hopefully it's going to keep going into their comprehension and their composition.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks for all your hard work. You've done a beautiful job.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Orton Gillingham Podcast, a Brainspring production. For additional content, please subscribe to our newsletter, visit our website at brainspring.com, or follow us on social media. To submit questions or comments, please email us at podcast@brainspring.com. Your feedback is always welcome.